Can you hear?
Churned up under of the ocean bed. No, I'm not running, and I never have been to the true bottom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's the Wine Hour, the talk show that removes your wine anxiety. A warm welcome to all of you. There's a lot of newcomers, so hello to all of you, and I hope you enjoy the show. And as usual, most of today's show's music is selected by our special guest, and today's Jason Haas, and it will be available very soon as a Spotify playlist. I love nature. Being immersed in it has been proven to make people feel better, feel happier. There's something visceral being surrounded by nature. After all, humans were not designed to live in concrete houses. In view of our evolution, we have spent way more time in the wild than in cities. Okay, I agree that the likelihood of being eaten by a lion in city streets has been sharply reduced, but you do get hit by bicycles or scooters or stuff like that at a higher rate. What I find fascinating is our relationship with nature. We, the thinking animal on whom was bestowed a reasoning, brain, and language, we quickly started to believe our own word. We thought that science, we could understand everything, and that eventually we could dominate nature and the nature that we have been coming from. We can talk about hubris in this case, but it's not that simple. After all, nature is far more complex than we have ever imagined. And each time we try to reduce it to a few elements, bad things happen. Petroleum-based herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, GMOs, etc. And then there's the effect on the climate, but don't worry, I'm not going to go into that direction tonight. So when it comes to our relationship with nature, not one of dominator to dominated, it is far more normal to be in a partnership where understanding and harmony reign. So when I see people like Jason Haas or Pepe Raventos, our last guest, I'm very happy. Actually, I'm very excited because they get it. And I'm sure they went through plenty of pushbacks, but that's okay because their mindset is unshakable. It just makes perfect sense. Our well-being, present and future, belongs to a world where understanding our position within nature is crucial, not as a master-slave relationship, which we have learned never turns out very well. Okay, that was a bit, put you in the mood. The cello concerto in B minor from Antonin Dvorak, the first movement interpreted by Rostropovich and conducted by Herbert von Karajan, a selection from Jason Haas. So here's today's menu. So first in Uncorked.Jaime, Araujo, and Jason will discuss if there's a future in En Primeur, in License to Taste. So there's something a bit special. I'll tell you about that in a second. Tanisha will talk to you about, a bit of a primer on California wines. And then in the Wine Minute, she will share her experience of being live again with people and events. And finally, in Have a Drink with Me, I'll have the pleasure to welcome our special guest, Jason Haas. But first of all, let me introduce you to today's cast. Okay, in the introduction, there's going to be a bit of a California theme, so forgive me for that if you don't like too much that kind of music, but it's okay. Danny California from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, coming from Paso, Robles in California. It's a marvelous honor, privilege, and pleasure to welcome Jason Haas.
Thanks, Antoine. Pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon, Jason.
It is.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Excellent. Yeah, always coming to the Wine Hour. It's always so much fun and so much pleasure to be surrounded by so many great people. Thank you. Are you having any kind of drinks with you, or? I know it's 12:30 in Easter time.
It's 12:30, but more importantly, it's 12:30 after we've spent the last week blending wines. We've been We've had César Perrin here, and we've been putting together all of the reds from our 2021 vintage. So normally I would be having something like cold and refreshing, like a lager, but it felt a little aggressive to be doing that at work at 12:30 on a Thursday afternoon. So my beverage at the moment is a nice cold glass of water.
Oh, this is great. This is great. I'm with you. I'm there with you. I'm there with you. Yeah. And now. It's the Wine Dream Team. They are back.
Much reduced.
They are back. So it's the moment you have all been waiting for. They make wine fun, interesting, soul, funky, everything. So from our global virtual studio, and actually very global this time, it's the only Wine Dream Team. So now we're going to be starting in California with... California Love by Tupac, featuring Dr. Dre, our Napa local. She's now the certified butterfly. She's supporting the Monarch cause, Mrs. Jaime Araujo.
Hello, hello.
Hey, good afternoon, Jaime.
Good afternoon. It's good to, I'm very excited for this. Sorry, I've been looking forward to this, to your conversation with Jason for weeks now. So I am very interested to see all the exciting things you guys are going to talk about.
Yes, and we too. We've been looking forward to that. Now, Akosh, I hope, are you there?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay, so I can do number
good.
2.
I'm gonna see the folks I dig. I'll even kiss.
Yes, I'm gonna see the folks I digs, all of them. California by Johnny Mitchell. Now he's currently, and this is super important because he's embedded. It's better than CNN. He's embedded in the En Primeur in Bordeaux at the gala dinner, and he's got like 500 people around him. And it's
look
so
inside
sharp.
there,
Mr. Akosh.
You see that? Thank you.
He's hiding outside. Good to see you.
I had to walk through a room of 800 people, and I'm in the back, and they're having their starter. So I said to my guys at the table, you know what, idiots, I'll come back for the main course.
So I saw the list. I saw the list of all the things you were drinking. It's kind of amazing. Can you just name a few of the things that you're having for the gala dinner?
Well, to be very honest with you, tonight is absolutely nothing. It's quite all right. But it's, the one we had, it was Tuesday, which was the Academy event, where we had a lineup of 2010 Aubryon White, then 2010 Chateau Mouton, Rothschild, 2010 Lafitte, 2010 Chateau Margaux, and 1990 Chateau Latour from Double Magnum. That blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. But tonight is a smaller dinner in a way of, you know, you have Salon Ségur 2009. They put their Lafitte 2001, so I'm looking forward to that one. And but it's good. It's a fun.
I don't know, Akosh. I think I can compete this week because over the weekend I actually had an amazing opportunity with my family and the Isley family to taste a bunch of 1970s. Con Creek 74, Phelps, Isley 77 or 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Sounds great. Okay. Everyone in the audience, if you had some great bottles in the past week or couple of weeks, just put it in the chat so we can see, we can all share that. And now, last but not least. Katy Perry, California Girls, to introduce Tanisha Townsend. Okay, so Tanisha Townsend is currently in Lago di Garda in Italy. Okay. And so the connection is not super great. So we decided she recorded her segment, and we're going to see that later on. And she said she's going to try to join in at the later stage. So hopefully she'll be there. In all cases, we're going to have our information on Lago di Garda at the next show. And this one we'll be talking about wines from California. Now, before we start officially, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. We'll put you on video, audio. You can put them in the chat as well. We can read them and then ask them on. And now everyone's ready. Let's have a glass of anything, a glass of wine, a glass of water, a glass of chai, a glass of emptiness, nothing. It's just a spirit. Cheers to all of you. Have a great show. And santé. And here we go.
Cheers.
Stand up straight at the foot of your love. I lift my shirt up. Stand up straight.
Blood Buzz, Ohio by the National. Today's Uncorked is about En Primeur. So Akash, you being in the heart of En Primeur in Bordeaux right now, the question was, is there a future of En Primeur? I'm going to run a very quick poll for the audience, and we'll check out the answers at a later stage. And Akash,
Yes.
you propose the topic. We start.
Okay, so I mean, first of all, I think we need to explain to the audience, those who don't know very briefly, what En Primeur is. So En Primeur essentially is, here I am in Bordeaux in the 2021 vintage, which obviously is extremely young and mostly not reflective of exactly what the wine is going to be in 3 years from now, where they're going to release it. But this is on what we need to base a judgment, whether we like the wine or not, or whether we recommend it or not. And the release campaign is starting next week, where supposedly in the past, they would sell the wine and you buy it now, the price of the wine is supposed to go up. Now, the debate is really on whether this is still the case, because to be perfectly honest with you, if you look at it in Burgundy, yes, that's the case. But if you look at Bordeaux in the past 10, 15 years, people actually who bought it En Primeur.
Okay, he got caught. Now, as he started talking about En Primeur in Bordeaux, which is basically the places where he started in France and in Europe, Jason, you had a very interesting information about the date of 1952. And there's something about your father who kickstarted something in the US.
Yes. So again, I did not know before we signed on, just before this, that this was going to be the topic of conversation. But my dad was a wine importer, but he got his start working for his father, who was a retailer in New York, ran one of the kind of venerable retail wine shops, was on the ball enough to get the first retail liquor license granted after the repeal of Prohibition. And he decided that there was this opportunity to kind of hedge his own risk by offering wine to their customers before it was ready for them to actually purchase. And my grandfather thought that he was nuts, that no one would ever buy wine before they could take possession of it. But he convinced him to try it, talked to the suppliers who he had worked with in Bordeaux, and managed to sell out a 3,000 case allocation in a few weeks. And so that was the beginning of En Primeur, at least in America. And it sort of has grown into this massive thing, including these investment opportunities and galas and festivities around it. But it started off as a way of the buyers offering a little bit better price on something with the knowledge that they had customers before they ever had to bottle and ship the wine.
So basically, it's like futures in the stock market. Basically,
it is. It's exactly that. It's futures on wine.
Yeah.
So the question. The question was, is there a future for it? So this is something that has been going on for a long time. So people were used to go and buy En Primeur to get, the best allocation, potentially the better prices, I would suppose, because they were buying before. Is it something that is still relevant today? Jaime?
Well, I think it's a very interesting thing. I remember Stephen Spurrier saying that he used to buy En Primeur every year, and it's actually how he paid for his daughter's wedding, because he made such an incredible amount of money on those wines when they were ready for sale, that he actually was able to sell a bunch of his En Primeur and pay for his daughter's wedding. I think that those opportunities just don't exist anymore. The En Primeur prices have gone up so high that there are a few that will increase in value between when you buy them En Primeur and when you actually receive them. But then there are a lot that have happened in the past where, especially in a really great vintage, when everybody is getting very excited and prices are going through the roof, the prices have actually gone down between, when the En Primeur came out and when the wine was actually provided to the customer. I also think that En Primeur was really useful when you had a lot of producers who were less interested in the market. It was much more interesting for them to get the money up front and sort of not worry about where the wine is going and what's happening to it. And I think a lot more producers are actually involved in the world now. So I think that kind of makes a difference. And you have to remember that the En Primeur in Bordeaux was always very closely associated with the place or the négociant system in Bordeaux as well, because the négociants would buy a lot of the En Primeur and then they would be the ones to sell it. And I just find it interesting because I think, just over these last few months, I've met with 4 different négociants and 2 courtiers who are all trying to find California wines, particularly Napa wines, to actually represent around the world. Okay. So is that a indication of them getting bigger or an indication that the Primeur is not filling their coffers the way it used to be? I don't know.
Akos, how's the mood in Bordeaux with the En Primeur that is taking place right now? Are people, the conversation are, this is worth it, this is not worth it, we're going to make some great deals, or how is the general mood right now?
This is 1946 for the world. Everybody is super
Akos,
happy.
If you were to turn off your camera, probably the connection would be better.
Yeah. Is it better that way? Do you hear me better?
Without the camera, yes.
Yeah, okay, fine. Because I have to walk away because there is like a band that started playing because I'm by the river, and there's this massive terrace here, and the band started playing, so I need to walk away from it. Anyway, so what I was saying, it is like euphoric. Everybody's happy. They haven't seen each other for 2 years or 3 years actually, and it's everybody's very happy about it. And to be honest with you, they produced a really good vintage, and people are optimistic. And I think that I came here with a lot of apprehension. I didn't know what to expect, but at the end of the day, it was really a great few days, and people in general are really positive. That's the feeling. Now, question is what the prices will be, as Jaime said, because the arbitrage opportunity, has gone away. The last time that it happened was 2019 when Bordeaux the prices by 30%. Because the 2019 vintage was sold in 2020, and that was great. That was a great campaign. Are we going to have the same kind of great campaign this year? I really don't know. It will only depend on how high the prices will be. So that's my take on that one so far.
Who decides on the price? Actually,
the Chateau owners.
But just like that, just say, okay, this one is
it's a massive ego thing. So the Chateau owners, they basically look at each other and say, okay, who is trigger happy? Who is going to be the first one to put the price out? Because that's going to be the benchmark. And so sometimes, nobody moves like for weeks and weeks and weeks. And at some point, Lafite comes out and that sets the benchmark. And on that basis, everybody else starts coming out. That's what happened last year, for example.
That's strange.
And has there been any talk about the fact that obviously Latour has pulled out of the En Primeur system?
Yes, everybody knows it, but it was it happened such a long time ago now that nobody really cares that much. It's just, it is. And but the vast majority of the people are not pulling out of the system because they like to get the cash up front. Not everybody has the pockets of Monsieur Pinot. And
Very true.
and what is interesting is I have visited chateaus, and Jamie, I mean, I have seen some spectacular wineries, but you need to come back and check this out. I'm telling you, these guys in the last 2 years, I went into Aubailly. They invested 45 million euros in a cellar that is like, it makes Star Wars looks like an ancient something, Oh my God. And it's not them. Everyone did it. It's crazy. Wow. It's like insane, the amount of money that went into these fees. I mean, I know where my money goes now, at least as I looked around, like, oh, right, okay. I know where it goes when I buy wine from them, But state of the art. And listen, what I want to talk about as well is that because from your perspective, Jamie, En Primeur nap doesn't exist, right? I mean, you guys only sell wine when it is already ready and it's bottled, right?
Yeah, there are a few people who do a little bit here and there, but there's no system like there is in Bordeaux.
No. So what I wanted to say is that, until about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Germany wasn't really selling it either. Now the Germans are selling En Primeur as well. And Burgundy, for a long time, didn't sell En Primeur. And in the last 20 years, it has become the norm that, people sell En Primeur. But they sell the vintages that are 1 year older. So right now we are selling the 2020 vintages in Burgundy, whereas in Bordeaux is the 2021s. You see what I mean? So it's interesting how every region kind of adopts themselves onto this En Primeur campaign, if you like.
Is it basically to maximize their profits?
Yes, absolutely. It's absolute pure greed. There's nothing else involved in it.
But what about the consumers? Okay, the question in the poll, just going to share the results. Have you ever bought En Primeur? 80% no. Would you be interested to buy En Primeur? Almost 76% yes.
Well, that's an interesting one. I mean, I have to say that, if you look at, and Jamie really hit the nail on the head perfectly. If you take the vintage 2010, which came out with a massive hype, the prices are still below the price that it was when it came out. That's a fact. Other vintages, not true. Yeah, the price went up, but mass price increases start to happen in Bordeaux after the vintage 2000. That's when really prices started to go up, next sellers, En Primeur. And then a massive jump happened in 2005, and then a massive one in 2010. And ever since, you just don't look back. It keeps going up.
But isn't that a problem for the reputation of the vineyards? That because if you're putting your prices too high and afterwards they go down, then people would say, "Then what have you done? I don't trust you anymore to price properly your wines." Could that backfire?
Yes, of course it can. But the word has grown in the meantime. The customer base of Bordeaux have changed dramatically into young, wealthy people who don't buy wine to store for the next 30 years. They buy it to drink, and they drink it young as well. And they're excellent, and they can do it, and they can afford it. So they change customer base.
Jason, is it something that you contemplated to sell En Primeur, or it never crossed your mind to do that?
Well, as Jamie said, there's not really a framework for it here. So if you do it, you sort of do it on your own. And we started, I think, because my dad had that history of selling En Primeur. We do a small program just with our wine club where we offer wine club members the chance to come in and taste the upcoming vintage of our two top red wines, the Esprit de Tablas and the Panoply. And we've done that since 2003. It's a chance for them, because they'll get a bottle in a wine club shipment. It's a chance for them to get 6 bottles or a case if they want to buy it and collect it. And we offer a little bit of a discount for people who do it. And it's really, for us, a chance to build some excitement on the most recent vintage and to do some messaging and communication. It has some benefits in terms of cash flow. It's not that you actually make more money at it; you just get the money earlier. But it's a program that I think is kind of hard for the average American wine lover to wrap their heads around, because there's so much wine out there. Like, you don't need to wait. You don't need to wait 2 years to get your wine. You want something, it's out there. We have a sort of an embarrassment of riches available to us as American wine consumers. So there's a lot of messaging that has to happen before I think it feels natural to at least our audience.
I totally agree. And I would just add that I think that one of the reasons that the Bordeaux En Primeur is so successful and can continue is that there's also a whole community of very sophisticated people like Akos, buyers, negociants, brokers, who actually go and, they put on these amazing events so that they can taste the vintage and advise people to buy them or not. And I think the average wine consumer really doesn't have a framework for tasting young wines. So I don't think it would be very helpful for them in the US, except, in Jason's example, the wine club members are already your people, right? They're already familiar with your wines, and in a small group, you can kind of curate that tasting to assist them to understand what they're tasting. But other than that, I just don't think it would be very helpful.
So basically, in the US, probably there's no future for the En Primeur to develop.
There is no future for futures.
There's also really no
the only time I've ever seen it really work is with wines that are super highly allocated, where people, like a sine qua non or something like that, where people just desperately want the bottles. And then the owner can actually, to Jason's point, push the cash flow up a little, and sell En Primeur and know that, their whole thing is sold out. Vice versa does the same with some of their top wines, just because they don't have any more wine to sell, so they're selling futures.
You want to say something, Jason?
Yeah, I think it's also important to distinguish between kind of investment grade wines, and that's sort of what fuels En Primeur, is that these are collectibles that are for resale if people want, as much as they are for purchase and consumption. And there are some domestic, some American investment grade wines, but it's definitely not the norm. It's a very few.
So I just would like to say something.
Yes.
I just would like to say something. So that you understand the business behind it. You remember Alicia taught us the 20%, 80% rule, meaning 20% of your customers generate 80% of your sales. Now, that's exactly what happens with the En Primeur campaign as well, which means that 20% of the chateaus are the ones that actually everybody sells, and they generate 80% of the turnover. And believe it or not, 80 to 70% of the wines are sitting and will sit in the négociant cellars for 10 years, 5 years before they can actually sell it. These are the petits chateaus that's at the Place de Bordeaux to the négociants. And the top ones will always sell. They always sell out. That's not a problem. There's never enough wine of those chateaus, And don't forget that the négociants, an average négociant house, some 25 to 30 million euros of wine on any given day. It's crazy. So the entry level wines don't sell. They don't sell. The business model here is to sit on wine and hope that the value of those wines are going to go up over the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That's exactly what we're talking about. So it's very hard to comprehend for the consumers.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for the masterclass, Akos. Before we release you so they can go back to the dinner, what is your thumbs up and thumbs down, if you have any?
Oh, my thumbs up is that, honestly, I came in here, as I said, with zero expectations, because when I've been coming here since '93, and when the Bordeaux are quiet, there is something wrong with the vintage. And in fact, the vintage was very difficult, but it turned out to be a classical, beautiful vintage that I have first discovered in '92 when I arrived to France and started working for him. And there were these beautiful, old, mature Bordeaux wines with lower alcohols. The average percentage of alcohol here is between 12.5% and 13.5%, We have not seen that since the 90s. It's crazy. And the wines are delicious, really delicious. And you know what it is? It's a wine merchant vintage, in a sense that the consumer needs to trust their wine merchant, because if the person has a good palate, they will be able to recommend them some gems, some really good wines that are not very expensive, and they can drink them, they can hold them. And I think these wines will last a long time, but they are already charming young. So that's my thumb up. And I don't have any thumbs down. Sorry, I think it's good.
Fair enough. Fair. Thank you, Akash. Jamie, thumbs up.
Bye,
thumbs
guys.
down.
I gotta go.
Bye.
I leave
Go
you
ahead.
in peace.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you,
Akash.
Bye.
Enjoy the party.
Bye.
No, I mean, my thumbs up, I would have to say, was this incredible lunch, like I said, that I was able to attend. Not just because the wines were amazing, although they were completely amazing.
Because of the butterflies.
No. This is the Isley
the Isley
or
one.
lunch that we did, but also because I always think it's very special when you have these kind of multi-generational families in our California wine industry, which is so young, and us all kind of working together and getting together and enjoying time. So that was my thumbs up. My thumbs down would be finding out that 99% of the monarch butterfly population has been decimated by mainly glyphosate Roundup since it was introduced about 50 years ago, I think, 60 years ago.
Yeah, our good friends Monsanto. Yes.
Yes.
The good guys.
But very happy, and this is the reason I have my little temporary tattoo, that there are people who are doing a lot of work to actually educate people and help those pesticides leave our shelves and help the butterflies come back.
Oh, this is great. Just for the information for our audience, and I'm sure that Easley lunch was very special because her parents, Jamie's parents, used to care of Easley Vineyards.
Yes, we used to own the Isley Vineyard.
So there was probably a very sentimental moment there.
Very. It was pretty special.
Okay, great. Jason, I know every time we do the thumbs up and thumbs down, and our special guest is there, and then afterwards is saying, why didn't I have to say my thumbs up and my thumbs down for the week? So if you have any thumbs up or thumbs down that you'd like to share with the audience.
I definitely have a thumbs up. The thumbs up is for kind of the restarting of events that bring us together around wine. This past weekend was Hospice du Rhone, which is one of the great wine events that happens here in Paso Robles. It's a celebration of kind of the Rhone winemaking community, not just in California, but in France and people who work with Rhone varieties in places like Australia or South Africa. And just after 2 years it's actually after 4 years, 2018 was the last one, because it's every 2 years, and 2020 didn't happen. 2021, of course, didn't happen. So it's the first time after 4 years, just being surrounded by that community and getting to wander through the aisles and taste the great wines from Châteauneuf-du-Pape and from Hermitage and from Gigondas and Vaqueras, as well as to seeing all of our community here. It was wonderful and amazing and heartwarming, and just a great kind of return of normalcy. So that's my thumbs up.
Yeah, you don't need to have a thumbs down. It's okay. It's fine. You keep it positive. Thank you very much, Akash and Jamie. We see you in 4 weeks on May 26th. Now, before we go on to License to Taste, we're going to take a short musical break. So if you need a refill, it's time.
Trying, and so
In his music selection, Jason Haas has chosen Courtney Barnett, Write a List of Things to Look Forward to. I like the song. I like the earphones on the earbuds on the plans to share the music. Now we're on to License to Taste with Tanisha Townsend. Circle the Drain by Soccer Mommy. So today in our License to Taste, Tanisha, as I said at the beginning, is in Lago di Garda, and so she can't make it because there's issues with the connection. So we were able to record part of her segment so that she's still going to be there. She said she was going to try to join us, but I'm not really sure she's going to be able to. So in that case, I'm gonna let you hear what she has to say to you from Lago di Garda, talking about California wine to start with, and after in her wine minute to talk about being back with live events and everything. Here she is.
Hey, what's up? It is Tanisha, and sorry I can't be with you live like I usually am, but as you see from behind me, I am out in the world, but I'll get to that in the wine minute. So, talking about California wine. California wine production has a very rich history of viticulture. Started in 1680. They actually started from Mexico and with Spanish viticulture, and from the Jesuit missionaries. They planted their vines that were native to the Mediterranean region. They used to use their wines for religious services at that time. But then in the 1770s, they kept going with that, and they planted the first vineyard in California, and it was called San Juan Capistrano. From there, you know what happened with Prohibition and the different issues and things that came with that. They were making sweet port style, and those big jugs that you see, that's the kind of wine that you got out of California at that time. So people were thinking of California like that. Fast forward, 1976. You've heard of that year before? Judgment of Paris. Well, that's when California wine really came into prominence. They really looked at California wines as amazing wines because they beat out the French ones. Stag's Leap Cabernet Sauvignon and the Chardonnay from Chateau Montelena, those were winners. The French people were amazed, slightly horrified because they thought their wines were the best in the world. But California wines beat them out. From there on, people really started respecting California wines. They gained notoriety, and here we are today. Wines of California are known around the world, whether it's Napa, Sonoma, Paso Robles, Santa Barbara, Santa Rosa. People are interested in looking for California wines. Now for the wine minute. Okay, what I want to tell you about for this wine minute is live events and in person. As you see, I'm not there on the Zoom with you, and from behind me, I'm in Lago di Garda, which is Lake Garda, Italy. I'm here on a press trip visiting some vineyards and tasting the wines of Chateau and Bardolina. We're in the Lombardy region, Veneto region. We're going to learn about that in a second. We haven't had the Marshall class yet. But I'm very excited about in-person events, being around people again, being able to do these in-person classes. Some people are nervous and not sure if they want to be in person, but it's a great thing. I'm happy to be able to taste the wines with people, talk to people, meet new people, and just to be with other people. Because being in my apartment during confinement by myself, no events, it wasn't the best.
So this is Tanisha's sharing her experience. So she's going to be back for the next show, and she'll tell us everything about what she discovered in Lago di Garda, which is in Lombardia. So now, last but not least, have a drink with me with our special guest, Jason Haas.
We quit so our thoughts can rest them all loving you. That's when we travel home.
Bleeding Heart Show by the New Pornographers. As usual, as I said, today's soundtrack has been mostly chosen by Jason Haas, and it will be available as a Spotify playlist very, very soon. If there's any question you want to ask our guest, you can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat. We'll take you on live, video, audio, or just text, and we'll do that. Jason, what a wonderful pleasure to have you on the show. Been looking forward to this for a long time.
In a couple of months that we've been working on this. I'm looking forward to it too.
Yes, there's something as I mentioned in the introduction, there's something with nature that is so important. And the first thing that that attracted my attention was the regenerative, organic, certified trademark first winery in the world. Can you tell us a bit more about this? Because we know about organic, we know a bit about biodynamic, but regenerative.
So sure, I think organic is for sure what people understand best when you're talking about kind of farming in a way that is good for the earth more globally. But organic is a pretty limited set of rules. It's basically a list of chemicals that you can't use. So you can't use chemicals for fertilizer or for weed control or for pest control. And if you don't use those chemicals and you go through a certification process, you can be organic. But it doesn't necessarily indicate a particularly great use of resources. For example, maybe you're flood irrigating a water-intensive crop in a desert climate. Probably, I think most people would not think that that was a good use of societal resources, but as long as you're not using chemicals, you can be organic. Or you could be exploiting your workers. You could be paying them less than a living wage, or you could, in other ways, be doing things that might not be good for the broader society. But that's not what organic is concerned about. Mm-hmm. So regenerative organics tries to take organics kind of a step further in building farms that have positive impacts, positive externalities on their soils and environment, their community, and their people. So there's essentially, I think of there as being like 4 pillars. One of them is soil health, where you're essentially trying to build these vibrantly alive, healthy soils, biodiversity, a healthy microbiome, all basically the things that biodynamics is trying to do. The second pillar is a resource use reduction pillar. So shared resources like non-renewable energy or water. In regenerative organics, you have to be reducing your use of those shared resources. So at Tablas Creek, we're 100% solar powered. We got our 4th bank of solar panels in last year. So that powers the entire office and cellar and winery. And then there are separate pillars for farm worker fairness, where you have to show that not only are you paying your farm workers a living wage, not only are their working conditions safe, but also that you're investing in their skills. You're investing in their ability to communicate. You're investing in these systems where you work in conjunction with their feedback is solicited and encouraged and acted upon. And then finally, the 4th one is an animal welfare pillar. So if you have any working animals on your farm, as we do with a flock of 350 sheep, those have to be treated humanely. So the idea is that you're essentially setting up your farm unit to be a part of the solution to some of these bigger picture societal challenges, whether that be inequality or resource scarcity or biodiversity.
Yeah, but okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Why go through all this? Because it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
So why would you go through that?
2 reasons. One is that if you believe that we as a society are living beyond our means, which I think I absolutely do, and I think it's becoming clearer and clearer each year between questions of climate change, questions of extreme weather, questions of water scarcity. I mean, these are issues that we're all facing. Given that almost 1/3 of the Earth's landmass is used for agriculture, if agriculture is not a part of the solution to these problems, chances are very good that these problems aren't solvable. So that's one piece. The second piece is that all of these things make for a better environment for growing grapevines and wine grapes, and make for a better business. So, for example, something that might seem abstract to people, like the farm worker fairness piece. Like if we started giving our field crew year-round employment back in 1996. So it's been more than 25 years. 4 of the original 10 guys who we hired in 1996 are still working at Tablas Creek 26 years later. That tenure, that longevity, the investment that we've made in their skills means that these guys have unbelievable pride in the work that they've done. They've touched every vine at Tablas Creek multiple times. And they are, when we do have to bring in guys from the outside, they act as these incredible guardians of the work that's been done. So that comes back around to help us in our grape growing. It comes back around to help us in our retention of people. And it comes back around in our reputation in our community. And all of these things are good for the business more broadly, as well as good for addressing the specific challenges of how do we get healthy grapevines making intensely flavored grapes in a stressful and dry and often rigorous climate like Paso Robles.
Yeah, but if it's so good for business, why aren't there more people into such programs, into that mindset of being, more in harmony with society, the people, the environment, the animals, etc., everything that is surrounding them? Why are there more people?
Well, it is a fairly new concept, I think. First of all, I know when we were approached by the Regenerative Organic Alliance in 2018 to be a part of the pilot program for this, because it's not a wine specific program. This is a program that has separate protocols for everything from livestock to row crop to chocolate to aquaculture. So
like B Corp,
it's a broader thing.
Like B Corp, which is not specifically for wineries.
It's exactly like that. I was going to use that as an example. So when we were approached about this regenerative organic, we liked the idea, but we had never heard the word regenerative before applied to this. It was a new concept for us. So I think in terms of people thinking about the externalities of a business, that's something which is relatively new. And just to give you a sense of how it's grown, I mean, we were the first, we were part of that pilot program. We got our certification in 2020. So it's only been 2 years. There were 7 more wineries who got their certification in 2021, and there's now 70 that are in the pipeline for this year. So it's growing exponentially as people realize what it's all about. And it's attracting a lot of the same people who had been farming biodynamically or farming organically, but who, like us, had felt like there were maybe some blind spots in those certifications that didn't cover the things that we thought were really meaningful.
And you see the difference when people come to you and they want to taste your wines or discover what Tablas Creek is about, and when they hear that you are, regenerative organic certified, or that even without a certification, all the care that you have put into the winery, into the surroundings, into the environment, does it make a difference, you think, when people come? Are they more, attached to the ethos that you're bringing forward?
I mean, it doesn't make a difference for everyone, but it makes a difference for a lot of people. I mean, there are people for whom, no, it's just all about the wine. It's and that's great. I mean, we're proud of the fact that all of these choices that we make, we feel like make better wine. But I do think that more and more people want to know that the products and the companies that they're supporting are having a positive impact in the world to the extent that they can. And there's lots of research that backs that up. And so does it matter for everyone? No, of course not. But I think it does certainly bring some people to us who might not otherwise have discovered us. And hopefully it helps the people who have been fans of what we're doing or have been interested in what we're doing feel good about their support of us.
Yeah, you have fans in the audience. Helen Siegel, we have great respect for Tablas for all this. So all the things that you're doing currently. So yeah, there are people. And then Cassandra Nagelese, she's saying, sorry if I misspelled the name, it's what makes Tablas Creek so unique, truly a leader in the forefront of regenerative practices.
Yeah. Jamie's comment about the B Corp that you had mentioned also, I think it's very much the same. It's very much the same kind of motivation behind it, is that it's a lot of businesses have always had this idea that they should be a positive force for good in their communities, but there hasn't necessarily been a shorthand way of indicating this. There hasn't been sort of an outside outside validation that this is being done, that people could trust. And so these kind of rigorous multi-industry sorts of certifications like B Corp or regenerative organic are I think really important, because that's sort of a shorthand for consumers who care about this to know that the companies that they're interested in are not just kind of talking the talk, but actually backing it up with their actions.
Yeah, when I was doing some research on the B Corp, I was seeing that there was, if I'm not mistaken, there's about 30 wineries, not distributors, but really wineries in the world that are B Corp certified, which is not a lot.
It's not a lot, and that Jaime would know better than I would. We looked at it a few years ago and didn't have the infrastructure to deal with the paperwork on it, but it's one of the things that's on my list for this year. Now that we've done all of the legwork to get the regenerative organic certification, I feel like it's going to be a little less overwhelming for us to approach.
Yeah, we're going to take another short musical break, and afterwards we're going to talk about you.
An old fairy tale told me the simple heart will be prized again. The toad will be our king, and ugly ogres are heroes. Then you'll shake your fist at the sky. Oh, why did I rely on fashion? Small fry, all promises broken. Feed your people or lose your hope. Forfeit your whole kingdom, but sooner lose it than stay living it alone. You were our golden child, but the gentle and the mild
In your music selection, you've chosen The Frog Prince by Keane. Why have you chosen that song?
So I just love the kind of peacefulness that song has. I like Keane a lot. That's been one of my favorite bands for probably close to 20 years at this point. But it's for me, it's sort of grounding. That whole album that is on is one of the. I had this exercise a few years ago where I tried to figure out what albums over my life I had listened to more times than any others, and that was definitely in the top 5. Just because it's sort of it can be both something you pay attention to, or it can be really lovely going on in the background, and it's just sort of, for me, it just sort of exudes peace.
So I was lucky to find to choose this one on the video. I didn't know. I didn't know it was so important. I just had that feeling. I don't know why.
And I was a radio DJ in college. That was one of the things that one of the things that I had the opportunity to do, going to a small college in Western Massachusetts. You could kind of do anything you wanted. And music has always been something that I've really loved. And it's been fun for me, even though, like, I've been out here in California now for 20 years, and I'm not exactly in a hotbed of live music particularly, but still being able to follow the kind of evolution of the indie rock scene, and to be in a place, and we're only half an hour away from Cal Poly, from San Luis Obispo, so it is a good stopping point for a lot of like surprisingly great bands going in between LA and San Francisco, or vice versa. It's halfway in between. So I think we get an unusually good selection of music here, even though we're sort of in the middle of nowhere. It's a little bit of the best of both worlds.
That's nice. But if you love music so much, why didn't you continue and instead of going into wine?
I don't think I ever really thought of music as something that I would do as a career.
Okay.
It's and wine, you grow up around wine, you grow up around wine people. It's a pretty compelling community itself.
So second generation?
Well, really third, because my grandfather founded that retail wine shop in New York called M. Lehman. It's since merged with another kind of classic wine shop. It is now Sherry Lehman, but it's still one of the great wine shops in New York. So my dad principally a retailer. Sorry, my grandfather principally a retailer. My dad starting in retail, but principally an importer, and then starting Tablas Creek as a retirement project with the family of producers with whom he'd become closest through his import work, and then me jumping in here for the last 2 decades. But
was it planned at the beginning when you were very young? They were saying, Jason, you'll be a winemaker.
I am not a winemaker, first of all. So I am.
The official title is partner and general manager.
Partner and general manager. We have an amazing winemaker named Neil Collins, who's been here, been actually out here longer than I have. He's been out here since 1998. But no, and my dad was, I think he was smarter than that. He didn't.
He let you come.
he held the door open and let me see what was on the other side of it without making me feel like I was being pushed through it. But he encouraged me to go out and do other things first. So, I mean, I have a master's degree in archaeology, and I taught for a couple of years. I got recruited to join a tech company during the tech bubble in the late 90s. I ended up managing a tech company. And it wasn't until Tablas Creek had kind of grown from being a project into being a business that it really needed me out here anyway. And I didn't want to come just with my name. I wanted to come with some skills that I'd built out there in the world. And having the chance and the encouragement to do other things on the way made me a lot more confident in my analyses and my judgments once I got here.
How much did those skills help you when you went into the wine business per se?
Every day. So not necessarily the archaeology skills. I mean, that's maybe not super.
But actually,
relevant.
I thought that this one would. Personally, I think it was the most interesting one from all the other ones because it shows you where we come from and how it was.
And wine is history in so many ways. Wine is a reflection of history. So anybody who has read our blog will know that I'm deeply interested in wine history. And the way that wine reflects culture and changes as culture changes and is brought from one culture to another. And so, I mean, in that way, it's kind of that study of archaeology is, I guess, relevant to that extent in that it's just a different way of looking at culture. But the reason that I chose to do that was it was something that I've always been interested in, but it wasn't something I was necessarily planning on as a career. But I figured it would give me a chance to travel and to teach and to work on languages, which would help me no matter what I did.
People skills.
Yeah, people skills and
opening of mind
and life experience, like world experience of the broader world.
Yeah. So when you came back and you started working in a winery, what were the biggest difficulties you've seen? Because working in a tech company, in a startup company, or in a tech company is one thing. High speed, a lot of pressure. I don't know if you had investors, but if you had investors, it was even more a pain. And then you had the bubble bursting, which is even a bigger pain than that. So the kind of pace is not exactly the same. But when you came into Tablas Creek and you started working there, what were the biggest challenges for you?
So there were more similarities than you might think.
Okay.
So the biggest challenge when I moved out, and they're really the reason why my dad asked me if I would be willing to come and move out and jump in at that time, is that we had come into this paying lots of attention and doing lots of work to make sure that we got the right clones in from France, the right grape growing techniques, the right cellar, the right winemaking. and sort of assumed that the marketplace would know that we were associated with Beaucastel and therefore buy it. And that turned out not to be a terribly realistic way of establishing a new brand, particularly given that at the time we had at least 4 strikes against us. We were making blends that didn't have a category in the American wine market from grapes that people didn't know and couldn't pronounce in a part of California they'd never heard of, with French names that didn't mean anything to them. So like we had set ourselves this pretty big hurdle to climb, and yes, yet expected that in this game of telephone that is the sale of wine in the wholesale market in America, where the producer sells it to, in our case, the import company that my dad founded, our national marketing agent, who would then sell it to the distributors, who would then have to message to the distributor salespeople, who would then have to sell it to the retailers and the restaurants, who would then have to message their people on the floor, who would then have to message to consumers. Like there's so many links in that chain that it just turned out to be unrealistic.
So I guess they were looking for the path of least resistance. Whatever is easier to go through that whole links to all these links would be easier to sell somehow.
That sales is almost always, distributors almost always work through the path of least resistance. You sell the things that reward your efforts. So this thing where you could sell 1 case at a time to a handful of places, and then those bottles would sit on the shelf because no customers really know them. And then that retailer would have to do the messaging. Like, do they want to sell that? Or do they want to sell the by the glass Chardonnay that might sell 5 cases a week with no effort? Distributors are behaving logically to sell the things that sell. So the year that I moved out here in 2002, we made 12,000 cases of wine and sold 4,000 cases of wine. Yeah. Well, you don't sell it the same year that you make it, obviously, because it takes a while to sell it. But the writing is on the wall that like you had better figure this out. And we were at that point, we were bleeding money. The partnership was put together in 1989, and we'd put money in already every year for 13 years. So the problem that my dad he didn't just dump it in my lap. We worked on it together. But the problem that he basically wanted me to solve was, how do we get the marketing pieces of Tablas Creek up to the level of the other things that we're doing? And we didn't know what was going to be the best way to do it. Our model at the time was to sell everything through wholesale, but that was the moment when we opened a tasting room. Like, we'd never had that. Maybe it would be good to make it easier for people to come and get excited about what we were doing. We started a wine club. We started participating in events. We started working with the distributors who were representing us around the country. We started being much more proactive and reaching out to writers and telling our story and encouraging them to come and discover what we were doing. And we also, and I think this is really important, we also kind of doubled down on our support of the communities that we were a part of. So whether that's the Paso Robles community and the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance, or whether that was the California Rhone community and organizations like the Rhone Rangers and Hospice du Rhone, where we really dove in feeling like if we could help these communities be successful and also establish ourselves as leaders within those communities, everything would get easier. And so that's what we did for the next 3 years. And we finally, by 2005, had pulled ourselves even, where we were making and selling 18,000 cases of wine.
So getting exposure, being in the market, being known, people understanding who you are, what you represent.
One by one person by one person, one time to tell the story by one time to tell the story.
And when we look back at that time, and you see how things are going nowadays with the means of communication, you think it was easier back then or today?
It's easier now.
Even with the amount of offers and how many wineries there are and etc. Okay.
Yeah, the tools are so much more developed now. So, there was no social media then. So you were so dependent upon the kind of middlemen, either the distributors or the writers, to get in contact with your potential customer. I think it's a little harder now than it was, say, 6 or 7 years ago, where some of the social media tools were a little easier to use without having to pay for them. but it's definitely easier now. The digital tools are just so much stronger than they were in the early 2000s.
Yeah. 20 years. When you started, what was your objective at the time? And you were thinking, okay, if we get to that place, it would be great. And then I'll ask the second question about today. So just to put you in the context.
So I think the objective was kind of, well, I don't know if it was simple, but I mean, the initial objective was we want to get to the point where we're not having to put money into this every year in order to keep it afloat. It was really a business objective. It was, how do we get this to be a self-sustaining business, not essentially this fancy project that needs ongoing support. And it took us, it was 2005 that we finally broke even for the first time. But that meant that we had to put money into this every year for 15 years before it finally, didn't make the money back that we put in, but finally at least became self-supporting. And the way that we got there was not the way that we had originally planned. We got there by really focusing on the direct to consumer market, focusing on our tasting room, focusing on our wine club, focusing on our website and our e-commerce piece, though that was small back then. But that was not the original business model. And that was one of the things that I've always admired about the way that my dad went about business, is that he was really a believer that you come up with a good plan, you put the resources behind that plan to see if you can make it successful. And if you learn something that suggests you should then change that plan, you change that plan and try to put new resources behind that change. That it's not like you can't stick to your original idea without being willing to adjust to the realities that are out there.
Yeah. But at the beginning, so the objective was to be able to be self-sustainable, because when you have the means, then you can develop, the project and the winery the way you want it, not being dependent because you need to find the cash flow and everything like that.
Yeah, and this was you asked what the goal was in 2002 when I moved out. That was the goal in 2002. That was not the goal when we started this in 1989. The goal in 1989 was to essentially kind of set the standard for a kind of a Southern Rhone model in California. And that's always been sort of the overarching idea, and that's never changed. But that was not what the real crisis was in 2002. The crisis in 2002 was, okay, all of those larger goals, those are great, but really, how do we make this a business that will survive till next year?
So that's the urgency. And fast forward, so you've got that development, you were able to stabilize and be able to get the proper resources to move forward. Now 2022, how did the goal change?
So I think we have bigger goals now. I mean, I feel good about where we are with that larger goal of being one of the landmarks for the Rhone movement in California. I think we've established that, and I'm proud of that. But a lot of the things that we're looking at now are the kinds of things that we address with the regenerative organic certification. Is how do we chart a path for wineries and vineyards to be a good steward of what we have, but not just that, to point a way for agriculture to be a part of a better future. I think that's a part of it. How do we help lead our community more broadly to an understanding of that, of those possibilities that are there? And then beyond that, how do we make sure that we ourselves are adapted for what we know is likely to be a drier, hotter future than we have right now? So our investments in things like dry farming and deeper rooting, higher vigor rootstocks and cover crops and more carbon content of the soil. All these things are yes, they're good societal things to do, but we feel like they're also part of a hedge against a future that we're sure is going to be drier and hotter than the past.
It feels like the challenges that you have today are harder than getting cash flow positive back then, because it's so complicated. There's so many moving pieces and there's so many different aspects to it.
It is. It's much more complicated. But we have at this point we have the kind of platform that we have the ability to at least take a crack at things like that. And again, these are not in any way in conflict with the goals to make amazing wines that have as much character of place as we can possibly get into them. They're totally in sync with that, but I think that doesn't really feel like quite enough in and of itself at this point for what we have the potential to do.
Yeah. So the future looks bright. And if you fast forward 10, 15 years, because I know that in the winemaking industry, as a winemaker or as a winery, it's long time. It's not 2 years, it's 5 years, it's 10 years, it's 15 years down the line. How do you see the future?
Well, even 10 years is not really very long in the grand scheme.
20.
Of like, yeah. I
pick the time frame.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard thing for me. It's a hard thing for me to do. I tend to have a pretty clear sense of what I want to attack in the next year or two. And I'm a real believer in kind of incremental improvements. You do things a little bit better each year, and the cumulative impact of that is huge. I do think a couple of things are going to become more common, or at least more important. One of them is that California, you've already seen the pendulum in California swing away from some of the super ripe, super extracted wines that I think maybe the region became known for a decade ago. Or not necessarily became known for, but became associated with a decade ago. I think you're going to continue to see that. I think there is going to be more and more of an emphasis on wines of freshness and brightness. I think acidity in wine is going to become more and more prized. I see the selection of grapes and grape varieties within the Rhone kind of pantheon, the primacy of Syrah and Grenache. I feel that changing. I think you're going to be seeing more of the higher acid grapes like Counoise and Vacarez and Sanso. You're going to be seeing more late ripening grapes like Mourvedre. On the white side, you're going to be seeing a further growth of things like Grenache Blanc and Picpoul and these grapes that retain the beautiful acidity in California. So I think that's going to happen. I think the big fight in California in coming years is going to be against fire. That has the potential to impact every California wine region. And that's become increasingly clear. So whether that is techniques in the vineyard and in the cellar to help protect grapes from smoke, whether it's things like we're doing where we're using our flock of sheep in the summer when they can't be in the vineyard to graze down the brush and grasses in the forest to reduce the fuel loads in the forest so the fires are less devastating, or whether it's something that we haven't even imagined yet. But I do feel like that's going to be a huge challenge. The challenges going forwards are going to be kind of fire and water. Not enough water, not too much water.
too much fires and not enough water. And do you think there's going to be more people that are going to be interested in the regenerative certified, organic certified certification, seeing your example and the ones that are, joining the movement, because they see that after all, this is all the things that you have left is that land, that earth that you need to deal with. And if you don't treat it properly, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know that it will be this particular certification program, but the idea of regenerative farming is, I think, going to be like in a generation, in 20, 25 years. I think it's going to be hard to imagine farming any other way, that either whether through resource depletion or legislation or societal change. This is going to be the norm. It's not going to be the kind of extractive method of farming where you're using a lot of chemical fertilizers. You're using GMOs that can withstand the chemical pesticides, and then like all of this aggressive tillage year after year, I don't think that's going to be a viable way of farming. I don't know what the system is or the mechanism is that's going to replace it, but I think regenerative farming is at least one possible path forward.
One possible path. Unfortunately, we're getting very close to the end of the show. We could go on for hours with the conversation, but before we finish, the usual pivot questionnaire. So this is the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay. So what is your favorite word?
Favorite word?
Yes.
Well, I know this because my kids make fun of me for it. My favorite word is lovely. Like it is a description that I use for lots of different things, and I think it's evocative. And again, my kids make fun of me for it, so I'm going to go with that.
It's very British.
Maybe it's all of the books. I don't know.
What is your least favorite word?
Well, I know at the moment, at least my least favorite word is frost. We've had three frosts in the last 2 weeks here.
None of which
have been devastating, but all of which have caused some damage. So it's not so much the word frost, it's more the sound of the frost fans going on, which they do at 34 degrees. That's just strikes dread at this time of year.
I can imagine. Your favorite virtue?
Kindness.
Your favorite quality in a man?
Let's say, well, kindness is too easy an answer at that point. But yeah, essentially, willingness to listen, willingness to engage.
Okay. What's your favorite quality in a woman?
I don't know that I've particularly thought about it as distinct from quality in a man.
Fair enough.
So I'll say the same thing. Just the willingness to engage.
Yeah. Okay, an easier one. What wine would you use to describe yourself?
This is not an easier question. This is a little bit like asking which of your kids you like best. So I hope I'm gonna use a Rhone blend as an example, because I hope that what I am is an assembly of positive characteristics from lots of different pieces without any one of them being so dominant that the others get swallowed up.
But the whole is in equilibrium.
Yes, I hope. I strive for equilibrium and balance.
Okay. What is your favorite curse word? You can say whatever you want. It's not beep, so
right. Okay. This is not a PG broadcast. My favorite is probably "damn it," which I feel like I say more often than I would like to. Just in a I knew this was going to happen, sort of an explanation. I saw it coming, but I still couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah. What sound or noise do you love?
What
sound or noise do you love?
The sound of waves on the beach.
What sound or noise do you hate?
So other than the sound of those frost fans going on, there is a particularly evocative sound in wine cellars, at least that every cellar has had it happen once, which is the screech of metal, which happens when you pump wine out of a tank, but forget to vent that tank and instead vent the tank next to it, where you have a giant tank that kind of crumples in on itself, and in our case, pulls itself off of the catwalk to which it's welded.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's not a pleasant thing. What plant or animal would you like to be reincarnated in?
I think it would be a sea creature of some sort, maybe a dolphin, something that I feel like they have awfully good lives.
They do. They do have. And last question, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Maybe just something simple like you made it, like welcome, well done.
Jason Haas, thank you very much.
Thank you, Antoine.
So this concludes the Wine Hour for today. Thank you for listening. Next show is on May 26th. Until then, drink in moderation, be well and safe. Faith always. We leave you with Wait For It from the original soundtrack of Hamilton. Goodbye.
Trying to keep the colonies aligned. Well, he can keep all of Georgia.
Thank you. It was so nice.
Thank you, Antoine.
Love doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints.
It was so nice. Love the playlist.
I loved hearing it. I had forgotten what all of the ones were that I had sent you. So it was great to hear the soundtrack of my life coming out of the street.
No, it's nice. Thank you for the audience. Thank you, everyone, for being there today. Thank you. It was very nice. Thank you. Thank you.
My grandfather was a